Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the brand new Le MER the bronzing powder. This is a limited edition bronzer that Le MER comes out with every summer as part of their Soleil de la Mer collection. I've been using this powder for the past couple of days and I am really enjoying it. I hauled this during my luxury beauty haul video that I posted on Monday, and so many of you commented that you wanted a dedicated video on this. So I thought I would do that today. We're going to be talking about some of the specifics about this bronzer. I'm going to apply it for you, which is why I'm at this kind of weird point in my makeup. I just have foundation, concealer, and powder down. And then I'm going to do some comparison swatches to some bronzers that I have in my collection that I thought may be kind of similar. Some of them ended up not being very similar at all. So we'll take a look at that towards the end. So let's go ahead and just talk about this bronzer. It is the Le MER bronzer for this season. It is limited edition and it is made in Italy. It's 13 grams, which is 0.43 ounces. So the first ingredient in here is talc. The second one is dimethicone. Just wanted to point that out for you guys. So here is a close look at the compact. There's a beautiful like sunflower print on the cover. There's also a nice kind of rose gold bronzy tint to the metal finish of the lid. And then we have a nice mirror on the inside of the compact. And then there is a close-up of the pan. I really love that sunflower design. So this compact is like the same size as their pressed powder. Here is their pressed powder. And this has like the silver chrome finish to it as opposed to this bronzy kind of rose gold tinge to this cover. And then here is last year's limited edition bronzing powder cover. It has the same kind of rose gold tint to it. It just doesn't have that sunflower design on it. And then the body of the compact is this like pearlized white finish, which is again the same as last year's bronzing compact, but different from the pressed powder, which has more of like a frosted see-through base. So the price of this bronzer is $85, and I purchased this off of, I believe, the Saks site. I will go ahead and link down below my description box to all the different retailers that I can find that have this on their site. Let's take a look at some swatches of this bronzer. So what I've done is I swatched the top, this middle portion, and then this bottom part. And then I swatched all three together. And you'll see that I go from left to right. So we've got the top, the middle, the highlighting powder, and then all three mixed together all the way on the right. You'll notice that none of these sections are matte in any way. They all have a satin finish. This bottom portion right here is almost like a highlighter. It's very deep in tone, so it's like a bronzer slash highlighter. It's very frosty. It is incredibly smooth and beautiful. I love the texture of these powders. They're just really creamy, but they don't feel thick or heavy in any way. And what I think is also a lot of fun is this top portion here is the least satiny. It's still not matte, but it has like the least amount of sheen. Then this has a little bit more sheen, this like darker stripe here. And then this has the most at the bottom. So I think the tone of this bronzer is it's very warm, but it's not orangey. I feel like it has a little bit of red in there to kind of balance out the orange. There's less yellow. So I find those bronzers to be really complementary to my skin tone when they have like just a little bit of red in there. I find that it makes my skin look like it's really seen some sun. It doesn't look fake in any way. I've been really enjoying this. I'm gonna go ahead and apply some right now so you guys can see what I'm talking about. I've been using the Tom Ford bronzer brush because I've really been enjoying using this kind of all over the face, but what I will do is really focus it up here. I kind of avoid this highlight part until later on in my application. So I'm just going to go ahead and tap this and again focus it on the top portion. So I'm just applying it to where I would normally apply bronzer, underneath my cheekbone, all over my forehead, around the sides by my temples. And it really just starts to warm up my face really nicely. And then, like I mentioned, this is a bronzer that I've been enjoying using kind of like all over my face. So I'm just going to grab a little bit onto the brush and just kind of start pouncing it down this bridge of my nose and my chin here. Maybe add a little bit more to my forehead since that's where I naturally get a lot more color than the rest of my face. And then I'll bring some down my neck here. And then what I'll do is I'll take like a blush brush, go into this highlight portion, and I'll do that with my Sonia G Cheek Pro brush. I'm just going to concentrate that right in that bottom section there. pick up a little bit of product and just focus that like right back here, just to add a little bit of shimmer and a little bit of color. You'll see that it's a little bit deeper there. And this could be a nice substitute for blush if you wanted to, or it could just be a nice little, you know, bronze on top of your bronze a little bit. But look at that sheen, isn't that pretty? Just pounce a little bit on the bridge of my nose, give it a little bit more color, a little bit of sheen, and maybe a little bit right here just in the center of my forehead. Then I'm going to take the bronzer brush again and just kind of buff that all out. So that is how I've been applying the powder. Let me go ahead and apply the rest of my face, and I'll come back and we'll do some comparison swatches with some bronzers that I have in my collection. Okay, I am back. I will leave a link to everything that I have on my face down below in the description box, as I usually at least try and do. Let's go ahead and get into the comparison swatches. So first I'm comparing it to last year's limited edition bronzing powder from La Mer. This one has like a big pink swirl right in the middle of it. So what I did with the swatch was I really focused it on the top portion where I'm only grabbing like the lighter highlighty color and the bronzer that's sort of like the base color in the palette. So that's what you see all the way on the right. On the left, I basically left up the individual swatches of the top portion, the middle portion, and then the bottom highlighty powder. So you can see in these swatches that last year's bronzing powder is much lighter, I think because of how much of this highlighty band there is in the actual palette, and it's a little bit less kind of peachy in its undertone. I guess you could say it's a little bit more neutral, but I find because of that highlight, there's a little bit more of a gold in there. So I find last year's and this year's to be very, very different, especially in its tone. Next up, I compare it to the Sisley Sun Glow Bronzing Gel Powder. And the reason why I thought of this bronzer immediately was the finish. So the finish of the La Mer bronzing powder really just kind of reminds me of this beautiful kind of satin glowy sheen that the Sisley has. And you can see here in the swatches that the first stripe of the La Mer is a little bit less glowy. It's a little bit more of a duller satin finish compared to the Sisley. But then I find the middle strip, and of course that little highlighty portion of the bronzing powder from La Mer, to be a little bit more sheeny and shimmery than the Sisley powder. Again, the tones are a little bit different. I find the Sisley powder to be a little bit deeper, and I find it to be a little bit to have a little bit less red undertone in there. So it's less of a peach. It definitely is like warmer, a little bit more orangey than the La Mer. Next, I'm comparing it to the new Tom Ford Glow Bronzer in Gold Dust. And the finish of this Tom Ford bronzer is very similar to that first stripe in the La Mer bronzer. It's maybe a little bit more satiny, but it's not quite as shimmery as the middle portion, and definitely not that highlighter portion. So I find the Tom Ford bronzer to be a little bit more neutral than the La Mer bronzing powders. It has a little bit less of that like peachy undertone to it. Next, I'm comparing it to the Chantecaille La Serena Bronzer Highlighter Duo. Again, I thought maybe the finish of these two powders were going to be similar, but again, I think the bronzing powder in the Chantecaille is very similar to the top portion of La Mer. It's just a really beautiful, like soft satin finish. And then the tone of it, kind of like the Tom Ford, I just find it's a little bit more neutral. It has less of that peachy undertone to it. And now we have the Hourglass bronzer in Luminous Bronze Light. This is the shade that's in the bottom right-hand corner of this Ambient Lighting Edit Volume 3. And the tone of the bronzers are completely different. The tone of the Hourglass bronzer I find to be a little bit more like yellow based. This Hourglass bronzer is actually not one of my favorites at all. I feel like it looks really muddy on my skin. It just looks wrong. But anyway, it doesn't have that warmth to it that I like. And the finish of it, so on camera, I think the finish of these two bronzers probably look fairly similar, but I find the Hourglass bronzer to have like really super fine micro glitters in there, where you don't have that in the La Mer. The La Mer does not have any glitters at all. It's just a beautiful kind of like frosty sheen. And then last but not least, I'm comparing it to the left-hand side of this By Terry Sun Designer palette in Happy Sun. I mixed all three of the colors on the left-hand side and swatched that. And you'll see that the sheen is very, very similar to like the middle portion and the highlighty portion of the La Mer bronzing powder. It has a very, very high sheen. And then the tone of all three of these By Terry powders together kind of fall in between the first and the second portion of the MER bronzing powder. I think this actually ends up being the closest in finish and in tone, just sort of like in a general feel to the MER bronzing powder. So I thought that was actually very interesting. That was not what I was expecting. So those are all the bronzers that I found in my collection that were kind of worth comparing to this particular bronzer. And I really didn't find anything that was like dead on exact in like finish and tone and undertone. As you saw, everything was kind of close. I just want to mention that some of the bronzers that I used for comparisons are like sold out. They're not available anymore. I just thought it would be valuable information if you did have these bronzers. All in all, I really love this bronzing powder. I was a little bit disappointed with last year's. I thought it ended up being a really pretty blush, and I actually keep it in my blush drawer, but that's not why I purchased it. You know, I purchased it hoping that it was going to be a really beautiful kind of like light bronzer. So this year's is not a disappointment for me. I find it to be really lovely. And I think if you have like a slightly deeper skin tone than me, this will still work for you. I feel like this is probably going to be a little bit too light if you get to like a deeper than a medium type of skin tone. There is, I don't know if I mentioned this, there is a slight MER fragrance. It's very faint, and I actually didn't notice it until I kind of put my nose up to it. It's not like an old Chanel blush where you open the compact and the fragrance just kind of hits you in the face. It's very soft. It's very faint. I actually enjoy it. So just wanted to mention that in case you were sensitive to fragrance. But that is it for this video. Please let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe down below if you haven't already. I'll see you in my next video.